The basis of the cult is this: you have to increase the amount of sinister, evil energy in our world, our dimension, to open up the stargates to let the dark gods in. And once enough evil things have been done to open up all the stargates, then the last dark god will come in and usher in the apocalypse, where they will be the only survivors, and they will go on to establish a colony in the Milky Way as the Galactic Imperium. Okay, that's the cult. That's the belief. Okay. But if you distill it down, if you take away all the fluff, what they're trying to do is get people to do evil things. It doesn't have to be you. In fact, it's better if it's not you. It's better if you can get somebody else to do the evil thing. They believe that that's like, they call it like sinister potential. It's even more sinister if you can manipulate someone into doing the stuff. Let's go!
Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me tonight. I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience. I know I introduced you to a couple of people recently. I have a good friend. He is a retired Air Force guy, and we talk a lot about J6 sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I watched a video of yours recently, and I had mentioned that you had talked about Jade Parker and how she was looking into the person who may have planted a bomb the day before January 6th, and I was letting him know, hey, look, there's a connection. If we ever talk about this on a show, we got to look into this, and you should look into her stuff because she talks about it. But we'd love for you to introduce yourself to the audience, and who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do is, I think, is a really important question.
Yeah, so my name is Becca. I go by BX, BX on X, and BX Writes on Substack, BX on Rumble. It's just pretty much that way all around the board. I started, I've been a private investigator and done a lot of security work in my background. I've been a competitive shooter, self-defense trainer, firearms trainer for years and years and years. So at some point, years ago, I decided that I wanted to start doing like some online, branding stuff where I could like advertise my firearms classes and maybe, do some stream some video games, talk about guns and self-defense. So I started a Twitch channel back in 2018 maybe. Okay. And, as I was doing that, I started to kind of get into this online world as a woman in my 30s, like online for the first time in a while, and starting to just look around and notice like how messed up everything was on the internet. And I started to notice a lot of, these like people who were grooming kids and abusing kids and preying on kids on the internet, using social media to do it. And it was a huge wake-up call for me as a mom, realizing that I'd spent so much time teaching people how to protect their kids from real world physical danger, right? But at the same time, there's this whole other world online that most people don't even know about, where their kids are at risk when they're just sitting on, unmoderated, playing on the internet. And so I kind of shifted my platform to going after these child predator networks online and like raising awareness to parents. And then at some point I started to kind of delve into mass shooting research because it intersected with that same kind of theme of like vulnerable youth or kind of mentally unstable kids getting groomed on the internet and radicalized by these bad actors into going and committing mass shootings and stuff like that. And so back in 2022, when I started to really look into that, 2021, something like that, I started immediately figured out that these kids were not lone wolf actors, that they were all in these harmful online groups, and that there were other people just waiting to, go on their own mass shootings, and it was a really horrible awakening. And when I tried to kind of sound the whistle about it online, I got mocked and harassed and basically laughed off the internet because in 2022, how dare you claim that someone was being groomed to commit a shooting, right? Right. Yes. And so, I didn't quit. I just kept going. I kept my nose to the grind, just kept grinding and kept researching until because for my own reasons, I wasn't even really putting out content for a while. I got really, I did get attacked pretty hard. Like my YouTube channel got banned and there was a huge cancel campaign kind of against me for all of my work. But I just kept going and kept putting the pieces of the puzzle together behind the scenes until finally, at some point in about 2024, I was ready to start talking about it. And that's when I released my video series, and people were a lot more agreeable to it at that point. And it wasn't until that was in late 2023. It wasn't until 2024 where I got really involved with this new child predator network 764, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And then, from there, I got in a little bit over my head, maybe somehow made myself the subject matter expert on this group, kind of unwittingly.
Right.
And now in 2025, it's all anyone's talking about. And so it's been it's been quite a ride. It's quite a roller coaster for me.
I can imagine. I spent some time on your X page a little bit every day, kind of since we started. We went back and forth about you coming on, just checking out what you're doing. You get a lot of hate, and you post the DMs you get from some people, and it's very, very vulgar stuff. And I think I should just say real quick, a lot of our audience, people watch this show on their TV in their living room. If you guys are watching this in your living room, just know that don't have kids around. I would say this conversation is probably going to get very dark and cover some topics like CSAM, satanic ritual abuse, things like that you definitely don't want kids hearing. But as a point that you like to make is a conversation you should have with your kids. But this is the conversation where you as the parent or adult should learn and then have a more regulated conversation with your kid. But it's wild, the stuff you get. It's not just hate. It's not like somebody telling you your political opinion is dumb. Like, you're getting people threatening your life.
Well, I get that too,
threatening
but
harm.
yeah.
True,
I try to stay apolitical. I know people assume I lean further to the right, and maybe that's true. But mainly it's just because I don't compromise on the Second Amendment, like, at all, for any reason. And I've gotten some pushback about that in the last couple of weeks, but I don't care. I got some pushback about that from the right in the last couple of weeks, and I still don't care. But as far as, like, I'm not a super political person, but I do still get, any time you're at the center of attention, which has been me for the past year. I've been at the center of attention, for better or worse. Anytime that happens, there's going to be people who don't like you. And I try to let it roll off my shoulder. But then the people who you're talking about is, what ended up happening is when I started to expose this network of sexual predators, child predators online, the 764 network, which is more than just a child predator ring, it's a terrorist network too. And they're out there instigating terror attacks and mass shootings, and all of this is a form of accelerationism, which is this tactic that extremists use to try to to cause chaos and disrupt society in the hopes they can eventually create the conditions for a collapse or a civil war. And so these people, obviously, who I started to expose and go after, are really, really bad. I mean, I've likened them to the new ISIS. I really do think that they're that big of a terror threat to the West. And it seems like the DOJ and the FBI and international law enforcement agencies are finally starting to treat them that way, which is great. But being the only person talking about it for over a year has made me pretty much their number one enemy. So I have a lot of really nasty, really scary people sending me really nasty, really scary threats pretty much all the time. That's become my life. I don't really want to talk too much about it, but I've been they've put out a lot of information that they think is mine. And I've had to deal with the authorities lots of times because of that. Because there's been a lot of swatting attempts.
Sure. Okay. No, I understand. Definitely don't want to talk about something that is going to compromise your safety and all of that, for sure. But I would like to sort of define terms a little bit for people that are listening and understand to understand a little bit. We're talking about, like you said, these organizations like 764. You talk about O9A, Order of the Nine Angles, and some others that you've talked about before. I think my question, and a question that I get from other people when I tell them about this stuff or is letting them know about you, is when I say satanic cult, right? One of the first things that comes to mind, I think, is this like Hollywood idea that's been painted about what that is. But my question really for you is this just a decentralized group of people who have basically been groomed to think the same way online? Or is this an actual network where there's some sort of organized leadership, like a terrorist organization, like you liken them to? And it is satanic, or is the message of Satanism just a vehicle for the hate and the violence and all that stuff? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it's a really great question. It's a really long answer, but I think it'll kind of set the audience's understanding for what this whole thing is, right? So when we use the word cult here with the 764 stuff, we're using that word very loosely, because what this really is now is an online network of people who ascribe to the same kind of line of thinking that they can create conditions for collapse by, disrupting society, traumatizing youth. I've called it a terror attack on our kids. Using our kids as a vehicle for terror attack. That's what it is. For 764, a lot of it's a bit more superficial. Like some of the people who are doing the abusing were actually groomed as kids to do the abusing. So there's like a generational trauma effect, which is the intended goal. But to really answer your question, we kind of have to go all the way back to the Order of Nine Angles, which has existed since at least the 60s or 70s. It's actually, I have a whole Substack article about it, and I have a 5-part video series, which I really recommend. It's not until part 5 that I get into the nitty gritty about all this good stuff, but I think it's probably the most comprehensive information anyone's ever put out on this cult. And I had to sort through a lot of BS to find it. So after this most recent shooting, for example, a lot of people were suddenly O9A experts. And the problem is that that's very dangerous. So like me personally, I've been trying to kind of shift the landscape and the understanding of this cult so that people understand that almost everything that's been put out about them over the past 20 or so years on the internet has been put out by them to try to mislead people. So a lot of times people are reading these old articles about the cult back before people understood that this was actually put out by the founder to mislead people. He put out he's written biopics about himself under pen names and very prolific writers, right? So the guy who started the cult, his name is David Myatt. He was born in the UK. He says he was born in South Africa, but again, we've recently found his birth certificate. So this guy's he's a habitual liar. Like he puts out all this lore about himself because he wants to sound super mysterious and cool, right? So back in the 60s and 70s, it was a very cool thing to start a cult, right? That was we were right in the post-Manson era. Death cults were having a thing. And David Myatt was a longtime National Socialist. So he was a neo-Nazi who was connected to a lot of British neo-Nazi movements. And David Myatt was a Nazi. That is what he believed, right? But more so than that, he also believed in accelerationism. He believed in this new, what we now call the siege model of domestic terror cells, right? Which is this idea that you can be more effective with a decentralized network that spreads virally kind of via an idea. It's a leaderless cell, which is much harder to attack and much harder to disassemble by law enforcement, right? As opposed to something like ISIS, right? And so David Myatt, this is all my opinion, but I think I have a lot of wealth of knowledge here, having talked to Sutter personally. Okay, and taking everything he says with a grain of salt, of course, because he's a big, goofy, 75-year-old dude who just Googles himself obsessively at this point. It's really kind of sad. But anyways, back then in the 70s, right, he started a death cult or satanic cult. And in my opinion, he was trying to lure edgy, goth, Satanist kids into his Nazi movement so that he could kind of push them to do evil stuff. But the evil stuff he was trying to push them to do was infiltrate political organizations, right? Do terror attacks or infiltrate places to try to spread National Socialism and try to subvert organizations and political groups, right? So this was like a Gladio era. This was a Gladio era tactic, right, of infiltrating and subverting groups, creating terror attacks from within, kind of false flags and psyops, and trying to do all these things to kind of set the stage for more favorable conditions for like a Nazi takeover.
Okay.
So does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So all of the stuff he wrote, all of the fictional satanic cult stuff he wrote, I don't think that David Myatt ever believed in any of this. It was very Lovecraftian kind of stuff that he wrote. I mean, it's not Satanism in the traditional sense. He's got dark gods and stargates and rituals to open the stargates and all of these things, and you have to go through this initiation path, and in doing the initiation path, which is self-led, self-guided, you have to take on what's called an insight role. And the insight role is infiltrating a political organization, for example, right? And so this is part of his initiation into the cult. See how he's kind of like tricking people into thinking they're in this cult, yes, when really he's using them as a vehicle for his neo-Nazi stuff? Okay.
Right.
So so if you look at some of like the older stuff that's been put out about O9A, they'll say that like, oh yeah, it's been around in secretive covens all over the world since the 70s. But in reality, what we know now is that it was literally just Myatt writing a bunch of fiction about his cult and making it seem like there were a bunch of covert cells when it was just him and like maybe 2 or 3 buddies. The cult didn't actually start to grow until the early 2000s, which is when they discovered the internet. They realized that they were very early adopters of the internet. They were on like, these old white nationalist Aryan nation boards, like at the very, very beginning of like, the internet. And they were using these message boards, and they were using Yahoo email groups and all of this stuff. And eventually he did start to like have some success growing the cult. And then, so at some point, he had a pretty good following at this point, pretty good group of people all over the world who were starting to do this stuff. And the basis of the cult is this, okay? You have to increase the amount of sinister, evil energy in our world, our dimension, to open up the stargates to let the dark gods in. And once enough evil things have been done to open up all the stargates, then the last dark god will come in and usher in the apocalypse, where they will be the only survivors, and they will go on to establish a colony in the Milky Way as the Galactic Imperium. Okay, that's the cult. That's the belief. Okay. But if you distill it down, if you take away all the fluff, what they're trying to do is get people to do evil things. It doesn't have to be you. In fact, it's better if it's not you. It's better if you can get somebody else to do the evil thing. They believe that that's like, they call it like sinister potential. It's even more sinister if you can manipulate someone into doing this stuff.
Manson-like.
Yes. So it's Manson stuff, but again, keep in mind that Myatt had a political goal. His political goal was spreading fascism. He was a Nazi. But there were a few people, I think, early on who really truly did believe in the cult and really did it because of the cult. But I think a lot of them also just ascribed to this accelerationism concept, this siege, decentralized, leaderless cell stuff. Right. So at some point, this guy Joshua Sutter comes in, actually he's known David Myatt since the 90s. Those guys go way back. But Sutter kind of took over O9A for like in the early 2000s. And Myatt sanctioned him to take over it because he wanted it to be more evil. He said, well, people think we're goofy and we're not evil enough, and people think we're a joke, and we need to be more sinister and scary. So Sutter came in, and that's what he did. He connected with people who made graphics and propaganda similar to what we see with like Terragram, the Fash Wave stuff, right?
Yes.
Yes. He infiltrated groups like Atomwaffen and the Base, and spread O9A into those spaces. Keep in mind that Sutter was and probably still is an FBI informant, so that bombshell did come out at some point. I do have my opinions about that. My opinion is that Sutter has my opinion is that Sutter is doing this for his own purposes. Like, he's a zealot, and he really is a Satanist, a cultist, and he does believe in this evil neo-Nazi stuff. And I think that he helps the FBI. He helped the FBI out in the past when it benefited him to do so. And I think the FBI was quite careless in their use of informants, right?
No doubt.
Yeah, because he operated with somewhat of an immunity there and was able to kind of get certain people arrested and steer more control over the terrorism landscape in that way. And so what happened was you saw the dissolution of Atomwaffen in the base because everyone got arrested. And in the meantime, he stepped in, formed an alliance with James Mason, who was a neo-Nazi who wrote Siege. And those two started working together, and they ended up breaking up. But, this ended up splitting off a bunch of different sects of, splinter groups of O9A. So now you've got NS09A, Satanic Front, you've got, you had his group, Temple of Blood, and these fash wave aesthetics that were combined with the occult elements, which were really viral. Long way of saying, like, I'm giving you guys a long history, but it's interesting, right? But what happened was that these aesthetics, and Sutter was very good at stochastically spreading these aesthetics into the terrorism landscape, which fused with a lot of these other Telegram channels and other Telegram kind of groups. And so now what we see is this fusion of this Order of Nine Angles aesthetic, even in spaces where people don't really adhere to that. And then what you have now is you have the O98 purists who do still exist, like the actual zealots that are really into O9A, who call everything else a LARP. And it is to an extent, right? So early on in the 764 saga, so 764 came from another group called CVLT, which was, a child predator network where they were extorting kids into, cutting themselves, sexually abusing themselves, and doing all kinds of other evil stuff. And a couple of those guys were Order of Nine Angles adherents. And so I guess that was their interpretation of the sinister path, was by abusing kids and doing this evil stuff. Pretty soon after this started to take a turn and the media started to notice, David Myatt came out and tried to disavow all of this and say this is never what he intended, and true Niners don't abuse children and all of this stuff, because it was clear that he wanted to separate himself from this because it's bringing a lot of law enforcement attention and media attention, and he wants to separate himself. But I don't give him that grace. I'm not going to let him do that, because this was he started it, and this is what he wanted. He wanted evil to spread throughout the world. You don't get to pick and choose now that things got too evil. You don't get to back up and say, oh, I didn't intend it, right? So after the CVLT started, then from there, we got the 764, which was basically just kind of a newer form of that, which combined all the O9A satanic aesthetics with the child abuse and extortion. Most of the newer members of 764 who we're seeing now are younger. They're only using Satanism in this form of these aesthetics. They're not true adherents to the Order of Nine Angles. The connection is very ephemeral and aesthetic at this point. So, I think that the media has a tendency to still say it's connected to Order of Nine Angles, but it's not really anymore. It's just this it's like a fash wave aesthetic, right? So that's, but then again, at the same time, this is why I've been calling it Satanic Accelerationism, is because it has the same effect, and they have the same combined goal of spreading evil in order to usher in an apocalypse. That's really what they want. Or to collapse the West. And they're just pretending that they believe in the Satanist stuff because they want to convince people to do these kinds of things. And so that's the very strange dystopian, it sounds like fiction. Doesn't even sound real. But unfortunately, this is the state of the terrorist landscape right now, and it took law enforcement and other people a really long time to come around to this, how dangerous this was. Because, when I saw this a couple years ago, I was like, what the hell am I looking at? I found Jade Parker's work, and I was like, what? This is crazy. She was right. She was right from the beginning. And she was laughed out of her field and basically gatekept and kicked out and gaslit into thinking she was insane. And now all these years later, people are starting to realize, no, this is a serious terror threat. This is probably the biggest terror threat that we face right now. And it's basically, like I said, using our own kids as vehicles for terrorism.
I think that even if, I don't know, are you a religious person?
I mean, I would say that I do believe in God, but I'm not like an overtly, like, I'm not really into organized religion.
Sure. I get what
More
you
like
mean.
a spiritual type of person.
Okay. I was just going to say that even if you think that you're just doing it aesthetically, or if you're not like a true believer, I think that when you look at who it targets, kids, right? Like the most innocent parts of our culture anywhere, that is pure evil. And that's exactly sort of like the mocking of, things that like Christ said about children and how precious and innocent they were, going after them. But the, one thing I noticed online recently, you I think you referenced it earlier in the conversation. You'd said about the most recent school shooter. You talking about the Minneapolis one?
Yeah.
With Robert Westman. I saw online that you were sort of saying that people were misattributing him to this cult. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so, pretty early on, before I found Jade stuff, or maybe after I found Jade stuff, but it was clear to me that, like, not all mass shootings were necessarily caused by these O9A satanic accelerationist communities. There's also communities that are geared around mass shooter Columbine fetishists, and those have been around for a long time. I mean, even before 764, we'd seen Columbine copycats. But it's been like more recently in the past couple of years, it seems like they are festering online at a very scary rate. So they have entire Discord servers, Tumblr groups, Instagram communities. On Twitter, they're using hashtags to share film edits of like sexualizing and glorifying these mass shooters, and these guys are real sick. In fact, I would say that compared to, if I'm looking at like a neo-Nazi white supremacist kind of accelerationist group on Telegram, if I'm looking at that side by side with one of these Columbine fan club communities, I would say that the Columbine fan club community has an exponentially higher risk of committing a mass shooting than the white supremacy communities, right? Sure. Even if those white supremacy communities are violent. Like these guys have like a 50-50 shot of actually doing it. So I know the law enforcement's been aware of this for a while too. It's particularly bad on Discord. So, in very recently, just in the past, like maybe year, we've seen these 764 network communities and these other different splinter groups of what we call the COM, is short for the community. It's like this broad cyber criminal network. We've been seeing a lot of overlap between the TCC, which is what we call the Columbine shooter communities. They call themselves TCC for True Crime Community.
Okay.
Yeah, it's misleading because we're not talking about lifetime specials here, right? But they call themselves TCC kids. And we're seeing a lot of overlap between that and the satanic stuff. And so they've been mishmashing, and it's like a Venn diagram at this point. So it's not that I'm saying that he might have been influenced by some of these groups, for sure. There might be stuff that we just don't know about. We don't have all of his accounts, right? But at first glance, he seems way more like the TCC school shooter fan club community, as opposed to the previous two mass shootings we saw before him were directly connected to 764. You could draw a straight line to the threat actors who we already knew. We could see the people who were grooming them, see the groups they were in, and they were directly connected to the 764 09A aesthetic, whereas Westman wasn't as directly connected. There were some, and so I'm not saying that he wasn't, it's possible, right? But I'm a very objective person. I have to go based on available facts. People had put out some false information. They had connected his account to somebody on a 764 connected website. But as soon as I saw that information, I started to say, wait, because, first of all, I wait 2 days. I try to wait 2 days before saying anything about a shooting because you have to let that wave of disinformation pummel through, right? You're going to see fake AI photos of him as trans. If he's not trans, he's going to be trans on 4chan. You're going to fall for it. People are still falling for the Sam Hyde meme. Sam Hyde's the shooter. Like, people fall for this stuff, and people also, they get into their little investigative modes, but they're not skilled investigators. So they just put something out and people just start sharing it. What's unfortunate about that is when they do that, so many people now believe it becomes basically a fact. You can't change people's minds after that happens, and it's very unfortunate. It's a very hard position for me to be in, because believe me, if there were a direct connection to one of these communities, I would be the first person to report it, right? But when they shared that account saying, here's the shooter's account, I immediately said, no, that's not the shooter's account. And I know that because I know who that account is, because I monitor these groups, and I know that's a threat actor who's still around.
Yeah.
And sure enough, within a day, he was already still posting and joking, haha, they think I'm the shooter. So that was misinformation that I'm still seeing shared, unfortunately. Once the balls got rolling, you can't stop it. So there's people who saw that once and they'll believe it for the rest of their lives because they'll never see my correction. But it's okay. I'm not mad that people are saying, oh, it's one of these 09A 764 connected shooters. So I'm glad they're paying attention to it. And like I said, these communities are like a Venn diagram. There's no organization and structure. So it's very, very likely that he was adjacent to some of these spheres. The one that the last two shootings, Samantha Ruppnau, the girl who shot up her Christian school, and then Solomon Henderson, the black neo-Nazi who shot up his school with that nonsensical, ridiculous manifesto. Yeah, so now that guy, those two were connected to 764 communities. And there's a new term for what we call some of these groups that use these aesthetics but aren't really part of the groups. And we call it LARPer core. This is what the name is for it, LARPer core. It's basically like soy jack and chud and and then O9A symbols and all of this stuff, and it's like vomit of extremism. Like it's like they went on a sampling spree of Telegram channels and just dropped all the memes. So that's what we call LARPer core. And TCC, the Columbine fan club, that's also very heavily into that sphere. So yeah, it's really complicated. It's not, I wish I could just be like, yeah, this, here's a 30-second explanation, but
no, it's very hard to do something like that. To your point, it sounds extremely decentralized, which is a very good tactic for something like this. But I get why you want to protect the reality of this group and who is in it and who's LARPer core, because if everything becomes 764 or 09A, then nothing is, or everything is, right? It loses its meaning completely and totally. And
I have a pet peeve of mine when things aren't correct. Like I want, if there's something that's not a fact, I don't, even though, it gets me a lot more attention if he is 76409A, right? I have no incentive to say that he's not. It actually, it's against my, my incentive to do that. But it peeves me when things aren't accurate, when things get stated as fact. This happened lots of times where people have this misunderstanding of 09A, or they've fallen for a bit of 09A propaganda, of which there's a lot. For example, David Myatt, you're going to see people saying, well, Temple of Blood was an undercover FBI operation the entire time. And because of Sutter's confidential informant status, which we know is a lot more nuanced than it's not like he was an FBI agent. He was a CI, and we know how bad those guys can be. So they took that little fact, and then Myatt, he spun the whole narrative that Temple of Blood was an undercover FBI operation, and he put out all of these misstatements or distortions of facts because he wanted everybody to think that the classic 09A that he created was different. So then I see a lot of people spreading this, but I'm like, man, that's actually propaganda that they put out there to try to separate the 09A from the child abuse stuff. Sure. And so I see a lot of people falling for that, and it irks me just because it's not, I don't believe that it's correct. No.
There was a study done not that long ago about the effects of watching television on people and the things that they believe. And watching something on TV, even if it's like fantastical, it ignites the same part of the brain that lights up when you are learning something. So if you're reading from a textbook, right, you're just reading historical facts, or you're learning about math, it's the same area of the brain when you're watching television, and it's Jurassic Park. And it can have the same effect on people where they start to believe certain things are true, even though it's absolutely not. And so this happens online even worse because of the way information proliferates, like what you're talking about. All somebody has to do is read the first 2 or 3 sentences of a whole paragraph and hit repost, and then now it's out there forever. And now people have sort of the idea of truth by consensus. They'll see the likes and the repost count on there, and I've seen people justify the way they think. They're like, well, this has got 3.7 thousand reposts, so like somebody in that 3.7 thousand people must know this is true, so it's good enough for me. And it is. It's a very dangerous thing. But I was wondering if you said that you could draw a straight line between these 2 shooters and 764. How was that something that you were able to do? That you were able to draw that line? How did you begin to trace that back? Are you use a lot of OSINT, or what do you do?
Well, so once we, I am better at OSINT now than when I started this, but I still do lean heavily on other people who I work with and other researchers who are way, way better at that than me. Right.
So you have a good team.
I have a really solid team. Yeah.
That's great.
And it's only 3 people, and they've been with me since the beginning. So,
awesome.
I've learned the hard way that, you can't just get a whole bunch of people working together. It doesn't work. The 3 of us work very good together. We don't want to add anybody to the mix. But one of my guys that does OSINT, he's very good at it. So as soon as there's a shooting, right, people are looking for the accounts, and because of the nature of these comm channels, Telegram channels, it's very common that somebody goes, oh, the shooter is in the Discord server, and whether they were or not remains to be determined, right? But in this case, we were able to find Samantha Ruppnau in some Discord servers. We were able to find her Twitter. We were able to find her Telegram channels from her Twitter. And then we just do like social media analysis and try to figure out, use our OSINT tools on Telegram to figure out what other channel she was in. We found her in a 764 Telegram channel. Looking at her online followers, we immediately noticed some people who were known threat actors within the Temple of Blood, LARPer core sphere. And those guys are higher level in that they're grooming people to do it, right? There's the layer of the kids who are doing it, and then there's sometimes there's a layer above that of people who are kind of coercing them to do it. And Samantha Ruppnau also had some people in her orbit who were arrested for conspiring along with her. One of them was a 22-year-old man who was arrested. So we were able to draw that direct line. And then what was interesting with that is that we were looking at all of her Twitter following, who she was following, because she's dead. So she's dead, and we found her Twitter account. And once we find her Twitter account, then everyone starts following, right? So who's following her didn't really mean that much, but who she was following before she died, that's where the gold's at. And we were able to find a lot of these threat actors. We were able to find a lot of people who were seeming to be talking with her about planning their own shootings. And so what we did was we compiled a list of those people of concern, and we sent that to the FBI in a cyber tip and said, these accounts here seem to be planning a mass shooting and need attention. They were connected to the Madison shooter. And a couple of those accounts were engaging with me. One of them was called, his name was Groidcell. Well, that was his Twitter handle. And that was one of the accounts that we escalated to the FBI and said, take a look at this guy. He seems to be planning a mass shooting. That person was Solomon Henderson. And 2 months later, he committed a mass shooting at his school in Nashville and killed a girl before killing himself. And I can't even describe the way that felt. when I was, are you sure that's him? Are you sure that's him? Like, holy shit, I was just engaging with this guy on X, and I sent him to the FBI. They weren't fast enough. He committed a school shooting. So that guy was obviously connected. I want to say that, yes, but at the same time, it's like the way the cyber tips are managed, there's so many of them coming in, and and it takes a while to build cases and figure out who they are. They need time to do forensic analysis to figure out who actually owns the account. We didn't actually know the identity of the person. All we had was a handle. So we weren't able to do that kind of legwork for the FBI. They have to do that. So, and then we had a list of 10 names, and that's a lot of work, to be fair. And it was only a month later that he committed the shooting. So I would never expect the FBI to work that fast. But that said, it was still like, oh, wow, we have our finger on the pulse of this thing to the extent that we are calling the next mass shooter before it happens. This is a really like a surreal moment. So that happened. And, since then we've actually been able to thwart a couple of mass shootings. We've been able to actually escalate a couple that we know did get arrested, did stop posting, whether they were younger or older. There was one case of an incel who was plotting something at a University of Alabama that I submitted I called the Fusion Center. And I said, hey, look at this account. They arrested that guy within 12 hours.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so sometimes it does work. It just depends on, how much information they're able to get. Because you think about it this way, a lot of the tips they get are from people who aren't even in the country, right? Then even more of those who are in the country are minors. They can't really do a whole lot. There's a lot more hoops they have to jump through. So sometimes it's easy, and they catch the guys and they prevent something. That guy I just mentioned, who they arrested in Alabama, he was actually just convicted, and he's serving 3 years for interstate communication of threats. So not a super high sentence, but hopefully he gets the help he needs. Who's clearly mentally ill as well.
Yeah.
But there's an example of a very quick turnaround, arrest conviction, that we don't see very often. There was another one who was connected to the guy who was going to assassinate Trump, the 17-year-old who was Nikita Kasap, who killed his parents and then embarked on a cross-country trip to assassinate Trump at the will of Ukrainian allegedly terrorists on Telegram connected to O9A. He was talking in the criminal complaint. He was talking to an account who we had also submitted to the FBI, and it turned out that person was like a 17-year-old who was planning a mass shooting, and he's gone now too. So, yeah, I want to be charitable where I can. I think that the FBI as a whole is a very disorganized organization. The field offices don't talk to each other. The left hand has no idea what the right hand is doing. Their resources are historically very mismanaged. Whereas something like this that we're talking about should be the highest priority, right? If you have a kid who's about to commit a mass shooting, there shouldn't be anything. I mean, aside from maybe a presidential assassination or something, right? Or like a September 11th level terror attack or something. But these should be at the very top priority of their cases. And I think that a lot of times they don't have a lot of resources to dedicate to this stuff, and so it gets pushed back or it gets reassigned, bounces around different field offices, and it's just mismanaged. The JTTF, I think probably, that's the goal of the JTTF is to really kind of take cases like that and work them faster. But I'm not really sure that it always gets there. I don't know. I don't work for the FBI, and it's only been recently that the FBI has been calling my phone every day. I don't know how they got my number, but somehow they figured out what my phone number was, and so now I get calls from field offices like all the time about these 764 cases and stuff.
Really? They should put you on the payroll indirectly.
I don't know if I want to take the Fed's money, honestly. You can, if you want to support me so I don't have to take Fed money, you can always subscribe to my Substack.
There you go. For sure. That has to feel a little good, though, that they're using your research and your information to help stop this stuff, though. So that's cool.
I mean, I've been told by several people that whenever I do a podcast, my podcast gets circulated internally via FBI emails.
Oh, wow. Okay, good to know. What's up, FBI? Hello.
Yeah, they'll see this, probably.
Good to know. What's up, guys? Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice to meet. No, I was wondering if about Samantha Rupp again. Was she groomed, or did her involvement in these chat rooms and stuff sort of like she like self-radicalize?
I think it's a combination of both. For Ruppnau,
Okay.
in fact, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but my buddy Ken Silva, who writes for Headline USA, he's actually writing a book right now about the Crooks assassination. And without giving too many spoilers, he has a really cool section about her that I just read today, and he includes a lot of information about the people who were kind of like pretending to be her boyfriends online. And two of them were, well, one of them was arrested, and the other one was red flagged, like they took his guns away. He was,
Right.
I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't think that's appropriate. Like, if you're gonna red flag someone like that, then why not just put them in jail? Like, they should be in
I agree.
custody, because
Yeah.
they'll just go on a
We could have a whole
stabbing
conversation
spree.
about red
Like,
flag laws.
yeah, it doesn't make any sense. If you can't have a gun, if you're not safe enough to have a gun, then you're not safe enough to be in civilized society as a free person, pretty much.
I agree. A kitchen
so
knife will kill somebody
yeah.
too.
And I actually am writing an article right now about the prevalence of stabbing and knife attacks in these groups. That's way, way higher than the frequency of mass shootings. It's
Right.
very much underreported in American media, probably because it's not as easy to politicize as the guns.
Sure.
But anyways, yeah, about Ruppnau, she was definitely in these communities, but she was also had people who were also in the communities who were very near to her. She was 15, and one of the guy who was arrested for like conspiring with her was 22. Her boyfriend. So, when you look at it from that perspective, it's really sad. I mean,
Yes.
because she was just a kid. She's a child. She was being groomed and provoked to do this. You got to understand, these kids are being targeted and they're being groomed, and then they're being indoctrinated and brainwashed into going and doing these things. It's very, very sad. So when you put that into perspective, it's one thing when you have a 28-year-old like weird trans dude who's angry at churches. Okay, we can't give him a pass. He's but this 15-year-old or like there was a 14-year-old in Sweden who went on a stabbing spree. He was a serial stabber. He had went on like 5 or 6 stabbing sprees at the behest of these cult members, the O9A guys, and so, it's like, man, the lines get very blurred when you're looking at the difference between an abuser and a victim. Sometimes it's both.
Sure. No, absolutely. Then you're saying this guy was groomed by these O9A guys to go out and stab people. They're an example of just getting somebody to do something else for evil, for the whole apocalypse thing that you were talking about.
Absolutely,
they're not interested
yeah.
in any sort of fascist movement. They're not asking a 14-year-old to infiltrate a political movement. You
Right.
couldn't do that.
Right. Well, so in the FBI's coined a new term. My term was Satanic Accelerationist, but I get why they wouldn't go with that. Okay, so they went with a term Nihilistic Violent Extremists, NVEs. This is the new group that they're harping on. But the 14-year-old in Sweden was a very interesting case. He was actually provoked by a group called MKY, Maniac Murder Cult. It's a Ukrainian neo-Nazi satanic cult with close ties to Order of Nine Angles, to the point where it's almost like the Ukrainian or Eastern European version of the O9A.
Wow.
They're very, very similar. It's a cult of serial killers, and their ideology is nihilism and misanthropic, just hatred of humans, right?
Right.
And so, their goal is to just go and kill as many people as possible, because we need to get rid of all of these people and kill, just total. It's THD, total human death. They want everyone to die. All right. And so this group is very much geared around trying to get kids to go live stream violent attacks and crimes like graffiti or vandalism, assaults, stabbings in the name of MKY. So this is another one that I've said before is a very serious terror threat. Because for a while it was mostly in Eastern and Western Europe. But now we're starting to see signs of them in Canada and the U.S. So they are spreading their influence here in the States. And so we do need to be on the lookout for them because they are a foreign terror organization. They're classified as a foreign terror organization. So they were the ones who have been provoking a lot of these stabbing attacks. There's been at least 8 or 9 stabbings, I think, in just in the past year connected to this cult. So they're just convincing kids to get knives and go stab people randomly on the streets and live stream it in a Discord server.
This is the stuff you don't hear on the news, like, at all. Like, I mean, you see there's a knife attack or whatever, a shooter, and there is the conspiracy tinfoil hat side of it, but it's never any of this ever, right? I've never
this
seen
is the facts.
It is right.
You know?
Right. That's what I'm getting at. Is it's kind of wild to not mention a cult who uses a decentralized network to. Tell me the difference in incentivizing a kid going and stabbing somebody and convincing a young impressionable 20-year-old Shia Muslim guy to go put on a suicide vest and blow himself up in a market.
It's the same model, isn't it?
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at. There's no difference.
Yeah.
Wild.
It's the virtual planner model. It's what it's called, where you can these groomers, these terrorists can be in Eastern Europe somewhere. They can be in Ukraine, or they can be in Georgia or Serbia, and they can be grooming kids within the U.S. to go commit terror attacks for them by proxy. And part of the way they do that is by indoctrinating them into this ideology and brainwashing them, and the very, very, very similar to what you're talking about, to the methods perfected by ISIS. This is just online radicalization in a nutshell, being used by our, well, I would call them foreign adversaries, but you have to understand that it's not like our foreign adversaries in the same sense that ISIS was. It's more along the lines of, like, these people are. They are fascists. They are neo-Nazis. The guys over there, like, Eastern Europe has a serious neo-Nazi problem. Like it's very, very bad. It's not. We're not talking about all people. Overuse the Ukraine. Russia has a lot of neo-Nazis too. Okay, there's just a lot of neo-Nazis over there. They're crazy. And what's interesting about going into those Telegram channels and exploring those groups is that they don't even really seem to care about the Russia-Ukraine war. They're basically like white people for white people, and we're not going to fight with each other. We're all united in our goal of collapsing Western civilization so we can install a white ethno-state. But to install our white ethno-state, we need a civil war. We need collapse. It's this fantasy that they think that after, in the smoldering ashes of the West, they're going to rebuild a white ethno-state. This is their fantasy. So that's their goal. It's still accelerationism. It's just not rooted in this satanic apocalypse. There's different types of accelerationism. This is the classic white ethno-state. Collapse the West, and then what will happen after the U.S. falls is that all of the Eastern European countries will also fall. Hello, kitty. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. You're all right.
The Eastern European countries will also fall, and then they'll be primed to kind of do their fascist takeovers.
How much have you ever looked into a lot of the Nazis that came over to the United States, like an Operation Paperclip or other
really
means,
interesting stuff. Yeah,
bringing with them some of this esotericism that was in occultism that was in the Nazi realm, right? There's so much of that. I've done a few episodes and talked to a few people. In fact, I talked to a guy who has one of his family members was a Nazi who fled Germany and came to the United States before the end of the war. I guess they saw the writing on the wall, as it were, and brought with him a lot of the occultism practices that they were into, and this sort of like generational trauma that he had to go through. And he recounted a lot this satanic ritual abuse that he went through, this conditioning through terror and self-harm and harming animals and harming other people, consumption of dead flesh, like all of these really terrible things that he had to go through and went through just to groom him into being an adult who would go and do this and carry on with this stuff. I mean, the esoteric occult side
esoteric
of this,
Hitlerism, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Very real.
Is that the term?
Yeah, and it's not my area of it's not my area of specialty, but I really do think that it's very interesting to kind of trace back the roots of the occult Nazism, because what's really funny is that you call Order of Nine Angles a satanic neo-Nazi group. And you get attacked by both the Satanists, like the Church of Satan, who say they don't represent us because the Church of Satan would never hurt a kid. And it's like, okay, all right, whatever, Church of Satan. We know what you are, like little progressive hipster Satanists who are there to try to like sugarcoat what was really happening, right? So you get the Satanists mad at you for that, and then you get the Nazis mad at you for implying that a Satanist could ever be a Nazi because, whoa, Hitler would have killed these people and blah blah blah. And you're like, yeah, but both of you are kind of living this fantasy with what we call like the no true Scotsman fallacy, right? Well, no true Nazi would ever embrace occultism, but they're denying the fact that there is a lot of occultism just simply rooted into the history of Nazi Germany.
Society,
yeah, and to be fair, like, to the Satanists, okay, the Order of Nine Angles is really a fictional fantasy cult. It's not true Satanism in the sense that we see like Church of Satan and stuff. Like I said before, it's fabricated fantasy. Which you could say that about all of them, but whatever. I digress. Okay, I don't want to get the Church of Satan to attack me on Twitter again. The Church of Satan official Twitter page has attacked me on Twitter lots of times. Okay.
Oh, sounds powerful.
Add that to the bucket list. Yeah. But so the Nazi roots are really interesting. You know what else is interesting? What I think of when you mention paperclip is all of the Nazis that fled to South America, which we don't really think about a lot. But then we tend to be kind of pigeonholed in our little U.S. and Western civilization.
Agreed.
But I've recently hooked up with a couple of researchers from Brazil who are, and Brazil is really cracking down on the 764 crime. Like they have really gone strong at it, and because there's a lot of it there. But when early on, before 764, when I was just researching mass shootings, I was like, wow, there's a lot of neo-Nazi based school shootings in South America that we never hear about. Way more than here, which is funny because they think, oh, school shootings is a uniquely American. No way, bro. Like there was like a period of time where it was like every month we were finding footage coming out of some neo-Nazi kid in South America shooting up a school. Really? You're wondering because you're like, wow, why are there so many neo-Nazi? Why do they have such a big neo-Nazi problem in South America, right?
Yeah.
You feel like you're literally not even white,
Right.
And so it's bizarre, but it kind of goes back rooted to this migration of Nazi concepts post World War II.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that is crazy. I've never heard of anything like that. I was wondering about the reason why I brought up the whole like Nazi occultism thing and the esotericism is you look at a lot of these groups and the iconography they use, the images and stuff. It is a total like co-op of I guess like esotericism in a sense. They use a lot of this, I guess, like the sacred feminine stuff. They use a lot of star signs. They use a lot of the Hollywoodized versions of these things, the Baphomet and all of this. And you said, and I think you've outlined pretty well, that it's not necessarily like a true like religion thing. These people are just using the imagery as a way to drive home this satanic concept. But when it comes to people performing acts of self-harm or harming other people, what would you say like the ratio is between true believers who are groomed into doing this stuff because they think that they're worshiping Satan versus people who are groomed into this and just have a proclivity to want to hurt other people?
It's hard to say, because when you're in these groups, like they all hate each other too, right? So they're always fighting each other, and because it's a notoriety, so it's like their main motive at this point is notoriety. Like it's a competition between the members of who can get the kids to do the worst stuff. If you can get a kid to commit suicide on camera, that's like the top, right? is really fucked up. And there's been several cases, like multiple, like lots of cases of this actually happening. But you know, it becomes a competition of like who can do the most horrible thing. Like they're getting these kids to kill their cat, their house cat, their pets, like their cats, getting them to mutilate their cats, torture them. You know, arrange their intestines into satanic symbols, paint on the walls in blood. I've seen nightmarish stuff coming out of this group. They're getting kids to, you know, cut their abusers' names into their bodies, into their, you know, naked bodies, and it's just the worst thing you can imagine. It's, if you can imagine something worse than pedophiles, this is it. It's worse. I can't believe I'm saying that, but this is objectively the most evil thing you can imagine. What we found is that there are cases where some of these people have been arrested who are just sick fucks. Like this guy, Richard Dinsmore, who went by the name Rabid. He was the oldest 764 member to ever get caught. He was 47. Which is much, much older, because these guys on average, I'd say, between the ages of 15 and 25. Okay. 47 is very, very old. And I have these recordings of him just talking about how much he just loved to get kids to, you know, hurt themselves.
You put
and
some of this in one of your videos.
I
watched
you probably, like his voice, I can't get out of my head. It's just so sick.
Yes.
He was sentenced to 40 years. He should have been put to death. You should just put that motherfucker down like a rabid animal, no pun intended. But you know, so those guys, those guys, I think, are definitely driven by self-gratification. Although I do think there is still a satanic accelerationist aspect to it, and then there's an aspect of notoriety. They want to be the sickest person, the top. You know, the person that everyone remembers, the most infamous, right?
Damn. Are there places in the United States where this is like a hotbed, or is it, you know, like they're nowhere, just mostly
evenly
online?
Dispersed all over the world? I would say, as far as the stabbings and stuff, like the more violent terrorism, for some reason there is a hotbed spot in Western Europe around Sweden and the Netherlands. I don't know why, but I'm working with film producers in Sweden, and I've already been in one documentary in Sweden about this because they've reported on it extensively. They're taking it very seriously, but for some reason there's just a lot of members there. I don't know why. As far as the 764 stuff, there's been arrests all over the world. Obviously, we hear more about the ones in the U.S. I think that there's been way more than we even know about because a lot of them end up being minors. You can't federally prosecute them, so they end up going through the state system and their names get withheld. Occasionally, the local state media will put out a story about it, and in that case, we might hear about it. But I'm sure there's dozens that we haven't heard about. What we see is that these kids just drop off. We don't see them anymore. We don't see their usernames, or they message someone and say, "Hey, I got feted." That's what they call it, getting feted. Yeah, I got feted. So I can't be around anymore. You should purge your chats with me, and then they go away. So then we kind of can figure out who's been arrested, even when they're minors. But the FBI has really pulled in some pretty big arrests in this network so far. They also arrested the leader of MKY, the Ukrainian serial killer cult. They arrested a guy who went by the name Butcher. And he was actually in Moldova. They extradited him just recently. There was they tweeted out they had like a top 10 list of people they'd extradited under Trump, and he was like number one. They really wanted this guy. He was the satanic neo-Nazi murder cultist from the Ukraine. He was actually trying to convince people to go commit stabbings and terror attacks, which we've been watching him do it for a while. When he was arrested, I was like, wow, what a great arrest. It turns out that one of the people he was trying to get to do one of those things was an undercover Fed, which I'm all about, because you arrested this guy who's a fucking foreign terrorist who was legitimately trying, and it wasn't like he couldn't get here. Like, no, he was actually dual citizen. So he was back. I don't know if he was a dual citizen, but he was back and forth between New York and Moldova. So this guy was bad. he was actually trying to convince the undercover Fed to dress up as Santa Claus and lace candy with ricin and hand it out to kids on Christmas.
Holy
So,
shit.
yeah, it's pretty fucked up. This guy was like a major terrorist. So they have been arresting. They have been getting huge arrests in this network. They did arrest the two leaders. Two of the leaders, of course, it's a leaderless movement, but these, when they say leaders, I think it's like two of the people who were at the highest ring. And those people, one of them was named, one of them was in Greece. He might not get extradited. We don't have extradition treaty with Greece, unfortunately. Yeah, but the other one, his name is Prasan Nepal, and yeah, no, he's gonna be, yeah, a big time. And then they got another big arrest just a couple of weeks ago, or like a few weeks ago. I got tipped off that this guy had been arrested who'd been threatening me, you know, the threats that I show online. Well, one of those guys was arrested and I found out and I tweeted about it, you know, because I confirmed it. Oh, shit. Yeah, that's the guy that I said. I did send his information via a cyber tip to the feds. So I tweeted about it. And then I got a call from the FBI field office saying, you know, we don't know how you knew that that was the case. And I said, because I'm a victim of this guy. And so now, you know, hopefully they'll get to include me in one of these criminal complaints. That would be great. Honestly, I would like to see some of these guys face charges for what they've done to me and said to me, and the threats that they've made to me and my child. I take that very seriously. So absolutely. I know they're watching this now. They're always watching my content, you know. Just know that we're picking them off one by one. And there's no hiding. They're all on borrowed time at this point. The FBI is going balls to the wall with these arrests. And so they're taking all of the 764 arrests very, very seriously.
That's good. Earlier, I just wanted to ask you real fast. You had mentioned you had a friend who was writing a book. You said about Crooks. Did you mean Thomas Matthew Crooks? Mm-hmm. Okay. Does he have a link to 764 and all that too, or it's just as if like
not that I found?
Okay.
Not that I found, but I don't know. I'm sure I'll find some more surprises when I read Ken's book. It's definitely going to be the most comprehensive book that anyone's ever written. Ken has been all over that from day one. So I don't want to give any spoilers, but definitely going to be something that I read very eagerly.
Mm-hmm. I'll have to check that out too. You had talked about how one of the goals here is to infiltrate political movements. Has there been any high-profile political, whether in the United States or in Europe or anywhere else, that's been tied into this and maybe assisting through funds or information?
I would say the biggest organization that's been infiltrated is the U.S. military. There's been several instances of these Order of Nine Angles guys infiltrating the military as an insight role. And one of them, a guy named Ethan Melzer, he was stationed in Syria. I don't want to talk out of my ass here, but he was in the Middle East, right? And he was caught actually conspiring with ISIS to plot an attack on his troop. So he was actually going to try to get the terrorists to attack his troop because he thought that would lead to more war, like it would lead to another declaration of war. So he was trying to extend the war, and that's part of his Accelerationism, and that was part of his insight role. And so that's one example. There's been several examples of these guys joining the military. Actually, that's a pretty common one to see. They also, you know. It's very secretive. So unless they've been arrested, it's kind of hard to know how many of these guys are out there. But they encourage people to join the military, law enforcement, and then they say far left and far right political groups. So Antifa, right wing extremists, you know, white supremacy communities. They do still exist, you know, unfortunately, and we want to pretend they don't, but they do. They infiltrate those groups. There's been indicators that one of them was at Charlottesville, and some other people connected were at Charlottesville and at January 6th. So it's very possible that those people were you know, in some way connected and in the crowd provoking stuff. So yeah, there's lots of examples I could give. Recently I found one of those guys in the gun community on Twitter. The what do they call it? Like goon Twitter. It's like the veteran
Yeah.
community on Twitter.
Gotcha.
He was LARPing, pretending to be a CIA contractor, and he had a fake organization and all this stuff, and he had acquired quite a few followers, and I had a lot of mutuals with him. So when I figured out who he was, I was like, alarm bells are ringing. You guys need to oust this person from your community. Like, he's seriously a terrorist. And that was the whole thing. I'll get into some other time. But,
Sure.
Eventually they did oust him. And now he's just been plotting to kill me for a year. So that's been fun.
Well, I hope that somebody does something about that, so you
Yeah.
don't have to worry
Me
about that
too.
anymore.
That'd be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got the FBI's attention, so maybe they can step in and do that. Actually, when I had messaged you on Instagram, we talked back and forth a little bit. I'd mentioned that I don't know if I'd said this or not, but that I was a cop in the military in the Air Force for almost 15 years, and when I was in Montana and then when I was in Germany, there were two instances. One of them, when I was in Montana, involved another service member who I had gone to a couple of different parties and had seen and like met him because we were in the same. He was also a cop in the military, and found out from talking to him over time, eventually, that he had gotten involved in a couple of right-wing extremist groups in Montana. There are quite a few in Montana, and had basically was bragging about some of the things he'd done or that they'd gotten him to do, and it's fairly graphic stuff. And then in Germany, there was an army service member who had gotten arrested for involving himself with some of the Russians that lived there in that community, and they were doing, it was a satanic thing that they had going on.
Interesting.
And they were using there was a cyber crime that was involved with it too, and they were targeting like German kids. And I don't know if you know this, like European kids tend to have a lot more freedom than American kids do, and they're more encouraged to go and participate in like alcohol consumption and going to clubs and bars. And it's just it's a very weird thing to see if you're an American, because it's not very common to go to the bar and find a 14-year-old there with their 14-year-old friends, but it's pretty common in Germany. And so they make for easy targets for people like that who go, and it's cool, and they can infiltrate that very, very easily. But I've seen it in the military. Just trying to throw some fuel on your fire there, because I wouldn't say it's like a rampant problem, but it does exist. And I think that
It definitely
the reason
exists.
why it does, and I think the reason why it does is just like that that community, I think, maybe just has a natural affinity for violence and chaos in general, and it just like reaches some people who see an angle in, and then too, being in the military gives people this like false sense of authority as well, and you see that a lot especially with young service members. But I've seen it in the military, and you're not wrong. It's not like a massive problem in the military with like a bunch of people just saying, but like
But it does make you wonder, like, how many of these guys are going under the radar too. And it's not just the satanic Order of Nine Angle stuff either. We've got a lot of neo-Nazi guys who infiltrate the military for similar reasons. And in fact, there were two guys who were arrested for attacking a guy on base with a hammer while stealing military equipment. And one of those guys was like a former ranger, I think. It was their names were Levi Frakes and Charles Fields. It was a big news story like a couple of months ago, and I'm trying to remember where it took place. Let me look it up. But yeah, I mean, the point is that there are definitely these guys out there who are just Nazis, neo-Nazis, and they're out there trying to join the military and steal equipment for terror attacks and stuff, or for paramilitary reasons, for their cells. They're taking their military equipment back to their cells for God knows what.
Well, not that long ago, there was a guy that was selling. He was stealing from the armory on base, and he was selling ammunition to a domestic terrorist group here in the United States. And so this, I don't know if it's money, if it's true believer for the cause, but yeah, people do a lot of dumbass shit that winds them up in jail.
Yeah, this one was, oh my gosh, it's going to make me pay. I can't even get past the paywall.
It's okay.
Oh, okay. Arrested in Lacey, Washington, near Olympia. They were arrested in Washington state with an arsenal that included dozens of guns, explosives, and body armor, along with Nazi paraphernalia. Attacked a soldier with a hammer while stealing gear from Joint Base Lewis McChord. So, yeah. And then we look at this and we're like, oh, yeah. The first thing we do when we hear news like this is start trying to figure out which Telegram groups they were in immediately, right? Who were these guys connected to? Or these, because there's so many different neo-Nazi cells too, these leaderless cells on Telegram. It's really out of control. There's so many of them. And, they're a pretty big problem too in and of themselves. So we do still have a neo-Nazi problem in the U.S., but I don't think that, I watched the trailer for that Savant show or whatever, and the way it's showing these guys is like right-wing, like actual conservative types. I'm like, oh, it's not really what it's like at all. I mean, I don't think that we should be conflating like far right extremism. Yeah, that's a term that they use all over the world. Okay. All over the world, they use that term. It's not necessarily, but we're not talking about like your dad type of conservative. We're not talking about just like random MAGA people who voted for Trump. Like these are Nazis. Like these are Nazis and they're terrorists and they want to collapse our country. They want to attack our country and kill people. So it's not, I don't like calling them far right extremists because it's such a loaded term that pisses people off. I mean, just call them what they are. They're neo-Nazis. They really are out there.
Yeah. It's what's that called? It's semantic overload is what it is. The term far right can mean to some people who it's somebody who voted for President Trump, and then it's it's fascism, so then it's Nazis, right? So there's no meaning. It's semantically overloaded, that term. I agree with you. It shouldn't be used. But I was wondering too, how much of this is in like organized religious groups as well? Has that seen an infiltration?
You talking about like accelerationists infiltrating?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe into, I don't know, Catholic churches, the LDS, anything
yeah,
like
I mean
that.
that is one of the and again, it's going to be hard to find a lot of like specific examples because these guys are secretive, right? This is an esoteric practice, and they're very secretive about what they do. But one of the other places that they encourage people to go do insight roles is religious groups like Christian churches or Islam, because their goal is not only to subvert those organizations, but that is, I think, the ultimate goal. But the purpose of the insight role is also about learning about something else, learning something new, learning new tactics, right? So, David Myatt going and joining an Islamic caliphate for years as part of an insight role, and he came back with all of that understanding of Islam and that kind of that influence and shaped how he built the cult moving forward. So same thing with the military. You're going there to learn about the military and gain a skill and become a stronger individual. A lot of it is about self-realization and gaining it's like a self-improvement kind of farce, right? Where they want, you're trying, it's a process of self-realization. It's kind of like, but that's the Niners. What are you going to do?
That's
I talk to them a lot, Actually, some of them have really taken a strong stance against the 764 network stuff. So a lot of them are my fans now. I fundamentally disagree with everything that they're about. But again, not all of them condone child abuse, and a lot of them vehemently hate 764 stuff, and they hate that their group is being associated with them. And a lot of them are kind of like you and me in the sense that they just hate pedophiles. They're like, I'm a satanic Nazi, but kids are the line, so there are, so I don't want to make it seem like all O9A are like crazy pedophiles. That's definitely not the case. There's definitely quite a few who stepped up and actually tried to assist with taking some of these guys down because, not even the satanic neo-Nazi cultists want anything to do with these 764 kids, because they're too sick.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think about this thing that recently happened where Roblox banned that guy Schlepp for what he was doing, this sort of like vigilante style that he was going after some of these guys. Roblox, I'm sure is a vector, right? And
it's the biggest vector.
It's the biggest vector.
That's if I had to say, so I guess we could talk a little bit about like 764, the way they find kids, right? We've talked about how they abuse kids, but let's talk about how they find kids. They find kids who are unsupervised on the internet, wherever they may be. One of the easiest places for them to find unsupervised kids is Roblox, because most parents don't realize that what Roblox is basically like taking your kid to a downtown area and sending them off to talk to strangers. There's really no difference. The fundamental concept behind Roblox is talking to other people, talking to strangers online. And a lot of people don't realize that their kids are being exposed to harmful content on Roblox until we started to blow the whistle on it. So a few months ago, we used to have this saying, all roads lead to Roblox, because every time we'd find one of these 764 members, we'd start finding their Roblox profiles, because that's where they were going to groom kids. And not only just to groom kids to sexually exploit them, but to find other kids to become abusers by inviting them into these Discord servers and starting the brainwashing process on them. So a few months ago, I hooked up with Schlepp and another guy, Ruben Sim, and a couple of these other Roblox catcher guys, because they'd been seeing a lot of 764 activity. And so by working with us, we could give them information on 764 and help them understand 764, and then they could help us to understand Roblox, because I'm a 40-year-old woman, okay? I don't freaking know anything about the Roblox that the kids are playing these days, right?
Right.
So, so it was a really cool, mutually beneficial collaboration that we had for a while, until we ended up finding this really horrific cult called the Spawnism cult, which was a group of 764 threat actors who we were familiar with. These people, in fact, they were connected to the Ruppnau shooting. It was the same types of people, same threat actors. Had formed a cult on Roblox and were getting kids to cut and to sexually exploit themselves for the Spawnism god. It was like this mystical, this completely fictional thing they were convincing these kids of. And it was really, really weird and really awful. A bunch of Roblox YouTubers were making videos about it. We were raising alarms about it. Me and Ruben Sim and Schlepp had been tweeting about Spawnism, to the point that it was, starting to get news articles written about it. And that's when Roblox stepped in and decided to ban Schlepp, which I don't think that was coincidental. I think that they saw the bad publicity of having this 764 story break, knowing that 764 is like the hot button topic right now, and Roblox does not want a big story coming out about it. So they banned Schlepp, which was a stupid move, because they Streisand affected everything and created a huge PR debacle. So I remember talking to Schlepp about it, and he was really bummed out, because he's a really good guy and he really cares a lot. He cares about Roblox. He likes the game and he wants to see it be safer. And he was really bummed out about getting his account banned. And I just was trying to tell him, man, I said, everything happens for a reason, dude. Watch. This is going to go crazy viral. He goes, I think this is about to go super viral. And I said, yeah, I think so too.
You got to talk to Chris Hansen.
Yeah. And I said, yeah, dude, I think, the silver lining here is that, you're like, so many more people are about to learn about this stuff because of it. Right. I was trying to convince him, because he was really bummed out. But yeah, what a nice guy. I feel really bad. He can't really do a lot of talking to people right now, because he's got a lot of legal stuff going on.
Sure.
But man, yeah, it's a good thing what happened, because it really did bring attention to this in a huge viral way, which is something that we really needed. I think we needed that spark to light under people, to get them to hey, 764 is a thing that exists and it's awful. B, hey, Roblox is terrible, regardless of whether it's 764 or we've seen Roblox communities where they have mock churches, where they're in these churches planning mass shootings. Like Roblox is a cesspool. Like you hear a lot about the sex games and stuff, but they're not hearing people talk about like the school shooting stuff. And also about the 764, the pedophiles that are on there. They just walk up to your kid with a shirt that says "I love CP" with a big swastika on it. Like, why do they even let people make stuff like that in the game? Like,
right.
you coded this into the game. Yeah. So, Roblox is, in my opinion, complicit, right? I do think that there's a fine line that we toe the line when we're talking about. It's the same thing with gun control, right? We don't want to give the government a reason to try to enact widespread censorship and surveillance initiatives, which is absolutely what they're doing. Anytime that they're pushing for like these digital ID stuff, or any kind of erosion of privacy, or AI facial detection and ID verification, I have to say no. I don't agree with that, and it's unfortunate that some of my research has been used to bolster the government's arguments, and I've seen some of my research make its way into these legal hearings, which sucks. I wish that weren't the case, because my emphasis has always been on parents, spreading awareness to parents. You're the first line of defense against this stuff. If you know what to look for, and you know how to protect your kid and teach your kid how to protect themselves from this stuff, then these people don't have victims. Right? This is a much better strategy than having the government come in and say, hey, let me protect you from these pedophiles. Well, number one, parents have a much better avenue of protecting their kids from these things online. And number two, hey, can we direct more resources to actually catching these pedophiles and terrorists, right? We don't need law-abiding people to have to erode our privacy rights. Number one, educate parents. Let's get some public awareness campaigns. The FBI has done some of that already, which is great. Number two, let's get more resources to getting these people off the internet. Who are they? Let's find them and arrest them, right? So I have to take a strong stand against the AI surveillance dystopian nonsense they're trying to pull.
Can't agree more. Like, just to touch on your parenting thing really fast here, like, you're right. If you get your kids off their tablets or off the computer, like, that's it. The whole vector completely and totally goes away, and it's sad how many issues would just be resolved if people would be better parents. But did you hear after on the wake of the Minneapolis Catholic school shooting, did you hear about Gideon? The software Gideon? Yeah, you have.
Yeah, so kind of what I'm talking about, right?
Okay, that's what I thought maybe, or maybe, yeah.
I would say that, there's a couple of different things I could talk about here, but, I don't want to say it's bad parenting. I think that, in a lot of ways, there's a technological literacy gap between generations that is just innate. Like, my child is 8, and my God, she has figured out everything already, to the point that she knows more about like the electronics in our house and stuff than I do. And it's really remarkable to see how quickly kids pick up technology just innately. And so I think that there's, in a lot of ways, that parents just don't know. Like, I've had a lot of parents come to me and say, oh my God, I had no idea that Roblox was like this. I've had parents come to me and say, after I watched you on a podcast, I went and took my kid's device and I found him in a Discord server that was sharing gore. My kid's 12, And so the parents don't know. It's not like they're bad parents. I mean, they're good parents to go, oh my God, I learned this new information. I'm going to go take my kid's device and look, right? Sure. So this information, which has unfortunately been gatekept by certain bad actors on the internet, right, who don't want me appearing on big podcasts for whatever reason, because this information could save kids' lives, and it has reached parents, and it has saved kids. I think that the White House should be doing press releases and public awareness campaigns about this stuff. I mean, remember COVID? We were hearing about that shit every day.
Still do.
And this is as big of a threat to our kids as COVID ever was, 100 times more.
Oh yeah.
So I think that there needs to be a bigger, more widespread public awareness campaign, and we need to get this message out to as many parents as possible. Because again, the only time I'll say that someone's a bad parent is when I see their kid getting caught over and over and over in these. What are you doing, bro? Take the phone away. Same thing with victims, caught over and over and over. Take the phone away. But a lot of times parents of like a 15-year-old girl, oh, she's moody, she's depressed, she's in her room, she's on her phone, and they don't realize that she's being controlled and extorted and manipulated. And these guys are not only manipulating and extorting her and threatening her that if they don't do what they say that they're going to kill her whole family, but they're giving her strategies to hide it from her parents. Right? Here's what I need you to do to hide your scars. Here's what I need you to do to get a burner phone. Sometimes they're sending stuff to kids' houses. They've sent packages full of razor blades, burner phones to kids' houses. I mean, it's sinister, man. So I want to be careful with blaming parents. I think that I want to get the point across that this could happen to anyone, and you have to be extremely vigilant. And if you go to my Substack, I've written an article that's about warning signs. It's free to read, no paywall. Warning signs that your kid could be in one of these communities without you knowing it, like behavioral signs, red flags, things that you might find on their phone, so that not only are you monitoring their devices, but you're watching out for behavioral signs that could be concerning. Not just that they're being sexually exploited, but maybe that they're in one of these school shooter communities, right? I've actually spoken to several parents who've come to me and said, my kid, I had no idea that my kid was in these groups until the FBI came to my house. And I found out that my kid was extorting other kids. I found out my kid was planning a mass shooting. And it's horrifying, right? It could happen to anyone. Some of the signs, it's in this article, but, there's a lot of them, obviously. But, signs of self-harm, any time that your kid is self-harming, that's really sad and needs addressed. But if your kid is carving symbols or names into their bodies, that's a sign that they could be being extorted by these people online. Obsession with Nazis, mass shooters, Satanism, occultism, like a sudden kind of fascination with this stuff is a warning sign. Being secretive about their devices, not wanting you to look at them, spending a lot of time in their room, acting afraid of, some of them can overlap with just having a teenager, right? But there are some very specific things that I think that parents should be aware of, and kind of understand what these symbols are and what these certain terms mean that your kids might say.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's good information. What would you say is probably the most sinister angle somebody's used to get at a kid that you've seen?
An angle? What do you mean by an angle?
Well, like you had mentioned that they'd mailed burner phones and razor blades and things like that to a kid. That's pretty wild. That's very, very out there to go do that. What is probably the worst thing you've seen that somebody's done to make contact with a kid in that way and manipulate them?
Well, I mean, so universally they're finding kids who are online already. One of the worst things I've seen was there's a community on Twitter called TWT, self-harm Twitter, and it's in an acronym I won't give you. Don't look it up because it's really, really sickening stuff. Really grievous injuries and stuff. Jeez. Where these kids are cutting themselves and they're looking for validations from their peers, and they're posing it as a self-help community or like a support group, but it's really just these kids validating each other's cutting habits, and it's really sick, and it's sad because they got really mad at me for getting one of their communities banned, and I got attacked by those crazy kids for a month straight, and it was rough. I honestly considered just taking a break from Twitter for a while. Those kids were way worse than any of the Satanist terrorists who've come after me, because they're like, this was our support group and this mean old lady took it away, right? But the thing is that the way we found it is that we were chasing these 764 members around, and we were finding them commenting on these kids' tweets. So you had a kid tweeting about cutting themselves, and you had the 764 member in the comments saying, hey, DM me, would you be willing to do some content for me? That's what they're doing. They're trying to say, hey, would you cut my name into your body? Or would you do something sexual for me? And then once they get that content from the kid, they extort them for more and more stuff. So that's how they're finding those kids who are already self-harming, because it's way easier to convince them to do that stuff, and so they have an opening. So the Twitter community that we found that the 764 members were in, using that as a feeding pool, it had 40,000 members. on X.
Holy
40,000 members. When I found it, my head exploded. I made a tweet like tagged Elon Musk like Hail Mary. The fuck is this? Ban this. Obviously, this is against TOS. This is just children cutting themselves and grievously injuring themselves on camera. And anyways, the community got banned, and then they figured out that it was because of my tweet, and I got seriously harassed for quite some time. BBC did a news piece on it. But yeah, that was the worst. That was the worst. And it's still there. They've reformed a new community. It seems like it'd be very easy for X to throttle this group.
100%.
I don't know.
Gone in a day, less than a day, if he'd pay attention to it. Yeah. No, I don't know, man. Sometimes I feel like stuff like this is allowed to perpetuate on purpose, honestly, because you would think that things like you're talking about are no-brainers to get rid of, to protect kids and keep it safe, and it just, I don't know. I am convinced that there's people out there who want it to exist, and that it's not everybody has a good agenda that has power. I do. I think that's you'd mentioned before that there were people trying to prevent you from going on like really big podcasts and stuff like that. Who are those people?
The person who did that was Kyle Seraphin, the ex FBI whistleblower guy, who's in a lot of hot water lately. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Just on the surface. I've never really looked into it.
So I don't know anything about him. I didn't really know anything about him. He had just started to attack me out of nowhere. The podcast that he kept me off of was the Sean Ryan show. I was actually scheduled to go on there like in 2 days. They canceled on me with 2 days notice after he... Well, this guy basically called them and lied and said that 764 wasn't real. Yeah.
You think a Navy SEAL who was in the CIA would know how to do some research, right?
Yeah. He wasn't. That's not what I think. He was just an ex-Fed, and I don't even think he was a good ex-Fed. I think that he got fired for being a weirdo. But now it's coming out that he's
Sean Ryan.
Oh yeah. Well, once CIA, always CIA. What are you gonna do?
I agree. Yeah.
But you do think I don't think that Sean Ryan even really knew. I think it was his producers. But what's weird is that this guy could have attacked me and my credibility. Who is this lady? She's just some crazy lady who doesn't know anything with no background. And sure, that's fair, right? But instead, he literally just said that 764 was made up and it was a satanic panic nonsense and that it wasn't a terror threat. And it was about 2 weeks after I put out, I did go public with what happened. It was about 2 weeks later that Dan Bongino came out full force, guns blazing on 764, and it became a national news story. So it didn't really hurt me except for keeping me off that one podcast or whatever. But just just the way but that's just so egregious to me. Like, why would you want to keep this message out of the public? What have I said here that was controversial or nonsense? Nothing was conspiratorial. It's just very, very strange to me. Like, why would me of all people? Why would you want to stop this message from getting out? It's very weird.
That's kind of what I'm saying, is that there are people out there who want this kind of stuff out there, because I think that they do believe in that satanic element, like what you were talking about, that they want evil in the world. And I do think that there are spiritual forces out there that are acting on us all the time. And I think that we're coming, it almost feels, I don't know if you feel this way or not, but I almost feel like there's all this pressure right now, and we're like a zit about to pop on this like spiritual aspect, because man, I don't know if it's because we're all like online too much or what, but it certainly seems worse, more worse than it was in the past. And a lot of this very evil stuff is much more overt than it used to be. And I think it is because we've all gotten sort of like used to seeing all of this online, so it becomes part of the background, and there's all this crisis fatigue too. So when you see it, this is another school shooter, you don't look into it because it's just like, oh, now this is normal or whatever, and you don't spend the time looking into it. But I think that the spiritual aspect of this is very much at play, whether people want to pretend like they're just like they're LARPing or not. I feel like this is a spiritual aspect of spiritual warfare going on.
I mean, for sure there is. And, I don't, I've had a lot of very kind, very sweet people offer me help. Like people see my message and they're compelled to want to help. Right. And in the past I was a lot more forthcoming with that of like, kind of like, yeah, sure. Start looking into it. But at this point I just tell people don't do it, because I don't know how strong you are like not you, but like the people who are messaging me, I don't know how strong they are. It's not just that I'm out here talking about this group that's on the news. Like, I'm personally involved to the point that my life is in danger. These people harass me, threaten me every day. They threaten my daughter. They do sick stuff to try to hurt me. They've made deep fake porn of me. Kind of silly because it's really bad, but
Wow.
They've pitched these rumors about me, fake OnlyFans pages. They've taken images they found on my daughter and made AI videos. I mean, like they've, I don't want to get too far into it, but like, I mean,
Sure.
my life has really been upended by this. And I don't know. I guess that I'm just built for it because for me, like the spiritual aspect of it, I make art also. I do art, to try to decompress and stuff. But like, I think I handle it better than a lot of people would, but it's definitely a slow burn. There's definitely some quiet moments where I sit with my thoughts and just be like, man, this is actually really freaking traumatic. Like, I probably have like major PTSD that I'm just like, it's like beneath the surface or whatever. So yeah, it's definitely not for the weak.
No.
Not for the faint of heart.
No. Where do you see yourself in the future, like with this? Like, do you hope to, you have your Substack, but do you hope that this becomes, I don't know, or writing a book, or you continue to investigate in a more direct way or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna write a book eventually. I know that there's some talks about documentaries, and there's a lot of networks that have reached out to me recently. So it's a lot of moving parts right now, but I think that something will eventually come of that too. Yeah, I do hope to kind of take a more hands-off approach in the future. I have been kind of scaling back already and doing a lot less like research in the heat of everything and taking
Putting
a
yourself
step
in
back.
groups
And
stuff.
there's other people who do that stuff and send me information too. So there's really no reason for me to be in there exposing myself to that kind of stuff anymore, because you have to limit how much of that you're exposed to. Just the evil stuff that's happening to kids in there is just very hard on the spirit. I do hope to one day retire and return to some kind of normal life. Maybe that's possible. I don't know if that's even an option for me at this point, but maybe a girl can dream, huh?
Sure. Have you been confronted like spiritually about this at all?
I don't know what that means. What do you mean?
Yeah. What I mean is, I know you said you weren't like religious, but have you had an encounter with anything that you were like, that's more than just a person's, anger and rage at me, that there's something else here at play, like in your life, or something that's happened to you because you are bringing this into the light? You experienced anything like that?
If you're talking about anything like supernatural,
Maybe, could be.
or
Not necessarily overtly supernatural.
yeah, I'm not like a sensitive, person when it comes to that stuff. I've had friends who are really like, they want to come sage my house and stuff. But I'm not a very sensitive person in that. I'm very practical. I see things. I'm very logical. I think that when it comes to these people who harass me and torment me and stuff, for some of the younger ones, especially when I find out, like there's this time that, and he's arrested now, but there was one particular member that was threatening me in some really horrible ways. and sending me tons of threats. And what I eventually found out from the FBI was that he was 13 years old, which was crazy. That was the first time I experienced like, oh wow, that the whole time I thought this was some crazy satanic terrorist demon, and it's a kid, right?
Yeah.
That's when I really started to soften a little bit and say like this. How's a 13-year-old a criminal? A 13-year-old's a victim, right? What is this kid going through in his life? And I ended up kind of forging a relationship with this kid over time because, they DM me constantly, right? And so finally just started talking to him and figuring out that he didn't have a very good family life. So for me, it's less of a spiritual thing and more like I can objectively see what's happening to this kid. I can see where his parents went wrong, where his upbringing went wrong, and this is the result. It's very, very logical for me to consider. And unfortunately, he did get arrested because he was making mass shooting threats, and they were very credible. So hopefully he's getting help and somewhere where he can. But it's hard for me to be mad at a 13, 14-year-old kid. How do I do that? I'm a grown-ass woman, right? Now, when it's adults and the adults are threatening me and stuff, that's another story. But, these kids. Even then I look at some of these really sick members, and I'm not excusing it because, again, these are the most evil people imagined. I mean, I think that you should just take them to the back of the courthouse and put them down like a fucking dog.
I agree.
Because they're sick. But also listening to a lot of these court cases and reading the appeals and being witness to the sentencing. In fact, there was one kid in the UK. I say kid, he was 20, I think, but he's one of the people who'd been threatening me. His name was Cameron Finnegan. He was arrested in the UK, and he was sentenced recently, I think, to 8 years. In the sentencing, the judge he actually read my name off because of the threats he'd been sending to me. So that was actually bizarre. I mean, it was kind of crazy to hear my name read in a British high court. But at the same time, he was also talking about this kid's abusive, he was a foster kid, he was abused, he was autistic, he had like very low IQ, very neurodivergent, very antisocial, and they considered all those things in the sentencing. And so logically, I can see why these kids who are a little neurodivergent, autistic, or abused or mistreated as kids, they grow up to be abusers, and they grow up to be, not all kids who are like that grow up to be monsters, right? But almost all of these monsters had terrible upbringings like that. And so it's not sympathy. I still think they should be taken out back. But like a sick dog, if a dog bit your kid, right? But at the same time, logically, I don't believe that there's demons possessing these people. They're just people who were victim to this kind of generational trauma. And this is the type of generational trauma that these terrorists are trying to weaponize and perpetuate. And so I kind of look at it more like that, I guess.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. I think, I personally, like, this is just like Brandon's belief system. I would say that, I do think that there's like demonic involvement, and I know there's a lot of people out there who would and wouldn't, but at the end of the day, like, the result is these people need to be stopped because they're hurting kids and they're hurting families, and they're putting content out there that's terrible. I actually meant to ask you at the beginning, but forgot to ask you, where did the term 764 come from? Does it have a meaning, or is it
it's actually really trivial and meaningless. It was the first three numbers of the founder's zip code in Stevensville, Texas, 764. Yeah.
There you go. Wow. Yeah. Very.
I know, it's so funny. It's so funny because people are like I'll see people in my comments and they're like down a rabbit hole trying to figure out an esoteric meaning, and it's like this 15-year-old just like named it after his hometown.
Yeah. Sounds like something a 15-year-old would do.
Yeah.
No, that's crazy. Well, I appreciate your time coming on and talking to me. I'm going to put your Substack and I'll put your X account and all that stuff in the show notes so people can go and find you. But is there anything else that you feel like a parent listening to this should know, other than what you've already said, maybe that we didn't get to, that they could use to protect their children and maybe even, be a little more proactive about it?
Yeah, I would say forging that strong trusting relationship when it comes to devices, right? Raising your kids to understand that not only do you have oversight to their electronics as long as they're living with you, but also that, you're their advocate and you're there for them so that if anything ever does happen, God forbid, because, things happen and kids do stupid stuff. And I've been in the unfortunate situation of having to talk to child victims who are afraid that their parents are going to find out because they don't want to get in trouble. They're more afraid of talking to their parents than they are of talking to the police. A lot of times they ask me if there's a way they can go to the police while remaining anonymous from their parents. And I've had to, jump through crazy hoops to try to convince these kids to go to the police, because if you don't go to the police if they don't have a victim, they're not going to get a conviction, right? So unfortunately, they're scaring and extorting these kids into silence, and so for a lot of that's why one of the reasons these convictions are harder. But what I've tried to say to these kids is like, hey, what if I talked to your parents? What if I sent your parents an email telling them how brave you are for doing all of this? Because I know if this happened to my kid, I'd want her to come to me so that I could catch that motherfucker, right? And I'd be proud of her for coming to me. So I try to talk to these kids from like, I'm a mom, and I think that I'd be really proud of you. But I think that my point is, having that relationship with your kids so that they know that you're their advocate and that they can always come to you if they make a mistake. And, if they're being sextorted, you have to understand as a parent that the odds of suicide and attempted suicide are monumentally high once these kids get trapped in these cycles of thinking that their lives are over, their nudes are going to get leaked to their friends and family. It can be very psychologically devastating. So have a talk with your kid about sextortion, right? Talk to them about it so that when they're old enough to understand, right? And let them know that if they ever make a mistake, that they can come to you without judgment. That'd be my biggest piece of advice.
I think that's great advice, honestly. Even I've never experienced anything like this, but I know firsthand just, how hard it is sometimes to just be honest with your parents because you're worried about the reaction you're going to get, right? So that's very good advice. Well, again, Becca, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. I hope you remain safe. I hate that people come at you like this, and when the message that you have is so important. I hope that you can get on some bigger podcasts, bigger than mine, certainly, and maybe a Rogan or something like that. One time you'll reach a lot of people.
No, I would literally die. Like, I would not be able to handle it.
You could do it. I believe in you, 100%. Like I said, everybody, please go check out her social media. Check out her Substack, which I will have in the show notes. If you're listening, you can find right there below. And anyway, you guys have a great night. And you, Becca, I appreciate your time again.
Thank you.